Good morning. When you think about resources, what comes to mind? How do you identify resources? How do you, say, maybe a 15-year-old identify resources? Turning midnight into gold, taking blows at her soul, hearing stories untold. She was 15 years old, still bending and mending to mold. Who is she? Is she you? Is she me? Why think critically? The future of our community, the living legacy, giving ideas birth, giving birth to earth. Searching for self-worth. Does it matter? Well, of course it does, and not just because, and not just because. Struggling with self-love. Her body is changing, and what are these breasts? And if I'm not careful, could carry disease of the heart, my chest. So much knowledge to impart. So what? I go to college. Do I have your attention yet? America, crime rates of our community have us shook. My name is Kareemah Hanifa. I was born January 15, 1978, at the Medical University of South Carolina. I come from an Islamic background. My mother is a nurse, and my father is an imam. I come from a largely blended family of 16 siblings. Sounds like a typical family, right? Today, I came to you to talk about resources in a way in which you may have previously not associated resources with the success of a youth. From a preventive standpoint, psychology shows that the most prevalent and critical years of a youth are between the ages of 12 and 21 years old. This study has been proven that the frontal lobe has not been fully developed, which is responsible for emotional regulation and decision making. Georgia houses thousands of females, according to the Georgia Department of Corrections. But before I talk to you about Georgia Department of Corrections, I want to talk to you about inner city youth who between the ages of 12, 15, and 15 years old may not display any criminal behavior, but may be at risk because of their demographics. We don't have enough resources available for young girls who are searching for mentors, sponsors, education, at some point employment, clothing, housing. Today, I want to challenge you with a question as I continue to speak. My challenge to you is, how do we create resources for inner city youth? Let's move to the next phase. With Georgia housing, according to Georgia Department of Corrections survey, in the year of 2012, Georgia Department of Corrections housed 3,500 women. That number has heightened since 2012. According to Georgia law, Georgia is responsible for the education of everyone who is under the age of 16 years old. That same law is in effect for incarcerated youth as well. So we have youth offenders between the ages of 12 years old and 19 years old. This age bracket is only responsible for a little less than 2% of the Georgia Department of Corrections population, but it does exist. So we learn through media and other media social facets the nameless offenses of young girls who commit crimes ranging from shoplifting and cruelty to children to murder. Upon conviction, we as community forget that they exist. The easiest way to erase someone is to make them invisible. While these ladies are incarcerated, they have access to limited education, limited social, emotional learning skills, and limited mentor prospects. Again, I want to remind you, my talk today is to challenge you to create resources for inner city female youth. Let's move to the third phase. The third phase is reentry. There are women who are incarcerated at a very young age who will one day be released. Who will embrace them? Who will provide them with employment? Who will provide housing? Who will provide psychological counseling and assessment? You see, when you're arrested, especially when you're young, there is a form of trauma that occurs, and that trauma doesn't go away. And these offenders will one day become members of your community. So either they'll be your neighbor because they are successful, or they will become vagrants, homeless people, because they are not successful, because they don't have housing, because they don't have employment, because they don't have resources. I'm sure everyone in this room has begun to wonder, well, what makes her the expertise? So before I give you my elevator pitch, there's something that I need you to know. Today is not about me. Today is me using my experience to pave the way for those who must come out behind me. Now, I'm not allowed to backtrack in my speech, but I must backtrack in time. In August of 1993, I was a 15-year-old, hormonally out of control young lady. And I use the word hormonally out of control because I didn't know at that time that my frontal lobe had not been developed. I didn't know at that time that the decisions that I made would affect me for the rest of my life. So summer of 1993, Kareemah Hanifa is out of control. I am a runaway in the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. I have an interaction with my mother doing this running away, and she says to me, Kareemah, there are two things that happen to young girls who run away from home. They either end up dead or they end up killing someone. That thought had no impact on me. I thought, oh, yeah, right, you don't know anything, and I don't want to hear it. At 15 years old, I would become responsible for the death of my 15-year-old friend. I would be convicted of murder, and I would be sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. You see, I wasn't ever supposed to come out. There would be many nights filled with sighing and tossing and turning, wishing and wondering, how did I get myself in this mess? And this was one time that not even my mother could get me out of it. So I began looking for resources. I began looking for ways to make a difference. I decided that I didn't just want to live, but I wanted to thrive. And I learned that I must thrive exactly where I was. And the next 25 minus 3 months going into 26 years would be spent inside of a prison. There were times when I thought that my situation was hopeless, completely hopeless. When I say sighing, you may think of being bored and say, But no, my nights were spent with tossing and turning and sighing. What have I done? Am I ever going to get out of here? And as my frontal lobe began to develop, I realized that I had taken a life. There was no way that I could ever give it back. Someone once gave an example that if you steal someone's purse, which is completely irrational, you snatch a purse and you take off running, right? You could stop at the next light and turn around and give it back. You could. You probably wouldn't. But when you take a life, you cannot go back and give it back. It is gone forever. So as my life became impacted, I looked for ways to give back. but I want you to know that there was no way that I could get back if I did not have resources. So at some point, my life changed from being completely hopeless to becoming empowered. I saw a pin light of hope, and I gripped a hold of it so tightly, and I refused to let go because I didn't want to just live, but I wanted to thrive. And my resources were limited. There was limited education. There was limited spiritual facets. There was limited, imagine being inside of a prison for 20 years. There were no mentors. So I decided that I would become a mentor, right? And as I began to reform my life, I began looking for ways to not just create change, but to leave behind a legacy. I didn't want to just come out, but I wanted to come out a better, a different, a changed, an improved person. Oftentimes when I think about this experience, I think about what my greatest desire was. So there were a couple of things that I wanted. I wanted my parents to be alive when I came home, okay? That was at the top of my list. I wanted a way to be successful. I needed a job. I needed somewhere to live. And all I kept thinking inside of my head is never give up, never give up. It doesn't matter what was said to me. Every day was not sunshine. My life is not a fairy tale, but never give up. Never. No matter how dark the path was, there was always that pin light of hope that told me that I must thrive where I am. I must do my best where I am. And when I ask myself, what kept me? I must say, it was my meditation and my prayers that I never lose the component of compassion. You see, I never wanted to become a product of my environment. I never wanted to be mean to people for no reason. I never wanted to be cruel or disrespectful to my elders. And so I learned to thrive where I was. And I was only able to thrive because there was access to a pin light of resources. Now, the solution to my problem, I propose that we create a foundation where young inner city youth find a safe place. You know, when I think about success in education and employment, I can only see a 12-year-old that I met while I was inside, whom had been abandoned by her family because her crime was against her family. And because she was under the age of 16, of course she was in school, but none of her other needs were met. And I can only think about the numerous ladies who are being released, who, because they came in so young, have limited resources, who are looking for employment and housing and social, emotional learning skills. And I also take into consideration that as a child, if someone hadn't have said to me, sit down, be still, and pay attention, that maybe I could have understood social, emotional learning skills. If we could have taught our younger selves to control our emotional response, to control our response to distress, then as elders, we realize that our lives could have turned out differently, right? So older people say, sit down and be still. Calm your mind. How? How does a 7-year-old calm their mind? Older people say, count backwards. Take a nap. Relax. How do you teach a child? How do you teach your inner city youth who has limited resources how to manage her emotions so that she can be successful? Success is so important. Hope is so important. And I say to you today, 26 years later, that I am grateful for my struggles, that I am a greater woman because of them. That my duty is to save the lives of the youth who may not be involved in criminal activity, but who do not have role models. It is my job to create resources for young ladies who have found themselves in a state of despair and hopelessness, to create a venue where they can still thrive where they are. It is my job to create resources for reentering ladies who have found that pin light of hope and who have chosen success over failure. And these young ladies don't need to be reminded of all the reasons why they cannot be successful, but of all of the reasons why they will be successful. And I remind you to never give up, because I don't and I didn't.
Visions that can change the world, trapped inside an ordinary girl. She looks just like me, too afraid to dream out loud. And though it's simple, your idea, it won't make sense to everybody. You need courage now if you're gonna persevere to fulfill divine purpose. You gotta answer when you're called. So don't be afraid to face the world against all odds. Keep the dream alive, don't let it die. If something deep inside keeps inspiring you to try, don't stop. And never give up, don't ever give up on you. Don't give up. Every victory comes in time. Work today to change tomorrow. It gets easier. Who's to say that you can fly? And every step you take, you get closer to your destination. You can feel it now. Don't you know you're almost there? To fulfill divine purpose. You gotta answer when you're called. So don't be afraid to face the world against all odds. Keep the dream alive, don't let it die. If something deep inside keeps inspiring you to try, don't stop and never give up. Don't ever give up on you. Sometimes life can place a stumbling block in your way, but you gotta keep the faith. Bring what's deep inside your heart to the light and never give up. don't ever give up on you. Don't give. Who holds the pieces that complete the puzzle? The answer that can solve a mystery. Yes. The key that can unlock your understanding. It's all inside of you. You have everything you need. Keep the dream alive, don't let it die. If something deep inside keeps inspiring you to try, don't stop and never give up. Don't ever give up on you.